Hi, my name is Anderson, and I will present for you this paper that is named Empathy and Creativity in Privacy Requirements Elicitation, Systematic Literature Review. The authors of this paper are Angelica, that is from UniCeub University Center in Brasília, Brazil, and me, Anderson, and Edna, that we are from Computer Science Department of University of Brasília, UNB. The plan is present for you the introduction, the background, methods, results, threats to validity, and conclusions. Introduction. With the emergence of new technologies and legislation, the protection of users' data needs have to be considered throughout the software development process. To implement software functionality that will make use of personal data, it's necessary to consider the privacy requirements during the requirements elicitation phase. Protection of privacy is important in various sectors of a company. The privacy requirements elicitation in the early stages of system development is essential to provide a high guarantee of privacy protection for stakeholders and consumers. Privacy requirements have six main subcategories: information ownership, information control, that is the authentication, information usage, information transmission, privacy assessment, and privacy verification. Based on these principles, each organization defines its own privacy policies. For example, when websites collect information from customers, they need to inform customers about the purpose for which the data is being collected, who is the recipient, and for how long the data will be maintained and how the data will be used. The aim of this paper is to perform a systematic literature review, an SLR, to identify the works in the literature related to the use of empathy and creativity techniques and privacy requirement elicitation. As a background, we have to say that design thinking is divided into several phases, and creativity and empathy are two of them, which can be used to perform the privacy requirement elicitation. Empathy is one of the five components in addition to self-awareness, motivation, self-regulation, and fitness in relationships. Together, they compose the notion of emotional intelligence. Empathy is an innate ability to perceive and be sensitive to emotional states of others and to share feelings, reflecting the ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes and understand their feelings. Creativity is the ability to produce work that is both novel and appropriate. Creativity is performed collaboratively because the creator does not exist in isolation, but within an environment that has a significant influence on what can be created. Well, the method that we used in this paper was a systematic literature review, an SLR, which is a way to identify, analyze, and interpret available evidence related to a specific research question, area, or phenomenon of interest. Thus, we have defined the following research questions, the RQ. RQ1: what are the techniques of creativity and empathy that are used in the literature for requirements elicitation? RQ2: are there works in the literature that use empathy in privacy requirements elicitation? RQ3: are there works in the literature that use creativity in privacy requirements elicitation? The research strategy involved the use of automatic search, which consists of searching through a search string in an electronic database, followed by manual search, and which researches must be carried out for work in conference proceedings, newspaper, or specific magazines. The following selection criteria were defined for the selection of primary studies. The study must be available in the digital database previously defined, and the year of publication of the studies must be between 1209 and 1212. Sorry, 2009 and 2020. However, classic sources with definitions, books with classic concepts, or pioneer articles could also be considered. Third, the study must be related to the requirements elicitation area. Four, the study must propose or evaluate methods, techniques, or models of requirements elicitation. After completing the study selection process, we recorded the basic information of each article in the form of data extraction. The data extracted from the included articles were analyzed with the objective of answering the research questions using descriptive analysis for the quantitative data and using the thematic analysis approach for the qualitative data. Here we have the uh, systematic literature review that we used. And first we had the search string, and after we did a search execution when we had 102 papers. After the reading title, abstract, and keywords, we rejected 5 papers. After we read the introduction, method, and conclusion, and we rejected 40 papers. When we read the papers completely, we only rejected 3 papers, and we had a total of 61 because we had 4 papers more in a manual search. And finally, we had 58 papers for creativity and empathy techniques for privacy requirements elicitation after the data extraction. As a result, for RQ1, considering the context of creativity, Valencia has integrated the philosophy of design thinking with creativity techniques and proposed a structured process called creativity. This process was evaluated by applying the process to a software development company using a questionnaire to collect the data and experiment for master students to use the process. In her work, she mapped the 60 creativity techniques, classifying them into 5 groups: requirement definition, analysis and design, modeling, implementation, testing, and deployment. In the group of creativity techniques used for requirements elicitation, 41 techniques were identified, some already recognized by companies and academically, such as mind maps, Ishikawa diagram, focus group, Hall of Fame, among others. In the literature, we found some creativity techniques: creativity workshops, customer journal maps, Hall of Fame, assumption busting, creativity triggers, pairwise comparisons, constraint removal, brainstorming, and idea box. There are several works in the literature that use creativity techniques to support the software development process. In addition, several authors use creative techniques to elicit requirements during the agile software development process. It's possible to find relevant works that address requirements elicitation and empathy in general. Levy and Hadar reinforce that need for empathy with end users by stating that this is a requirement engineer skill as necessary as technical knowledge and social competence. Empathy is necessary to work with the diversity of users, allowing a better requirements elicitation. To improve the requirements elicitation and the experience of using the software, the PAThy technique, personas empathy, was created. This technique integrates the guide questions and the empathy map structure with the idea of describing users through personas. The technique is based on 6 steps: what the user does, what the user feels or thinks, what is the experience of technology, what are the problems to be solved with the solution to be developed, what are the application features, and if there are existing solutions. Empathy map method, the EMM, in the design thinking approach is a powerful tool, but methodological skills and expert experience are required to guide the team. The authors propose an approach to make complex collaborative techniques widely available to practitioners with no EMM experience by documenting knowledge about facilitation through collaborative engineering (CE) approaches in structured process projects. As a result, for ARC2, Levy and Hadar performed an analysis using design thinking and found that, in general, software developers do not meet privacy requirements. The study found that the lack of empathy leads developers to neglect important concerns about the privacy of users' data when designing software systems. The authors concluded that the design thinking empathy stage is a necessary component of requirements engineering to unravel and address requirements with a high risk of being ignored. In addition, the authors concluded that the use of empathy techniques and tools in privacy requirements solicitation can promote empathy practice and skill among software engineers who generally do not practice empathy in their requirement solicitation activities. The authors concluded that the lack of empathetic practice leads to neglect of privacy requirements. The use of empathy can provide better requirement solicitation, leading to better performance in privacy requirement solicitation activities. So, Barr and 20 used the design thinking empathy phase from the 6-phase model to define 3 privacy by design (PBD) components for complex information systems: problem space, solution space, and mapping space. Design thinking was considered appropriated by the authors to support the elicitation of privacy requirements, since the empathy phase made it easier to discover and understand the concerns, problems, and real experience of the stakeholders. Guarqueni et al. Proposed a unified framework that incorporates a game theoretical model to address empathy, privacy, and ethics, interplay in smart built environments. The authors say that the use of empathy in software development activities lets developers to create products that can improve human well-being. As a result of our RQ3, the need for innovation in creative solutions has driven requirements engineering to obtain useful and appropriate requirements. Some works were found that relate creativity to requirements engineers, but no works were found that relate creativity to the elicitation of privacy requirements. Thus, we choose to identify articles that work with privacy requirements and cite creativity techniques identified by other authors as creativity techniques in eliciting requirements. Some authors studied the use of personas related to privacy in conjunction with the identification of the requirements specification paradigm to be adopted to increase effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction of privacy requirements, and others identified personas as one of the creative techniques to be used in requirements elicitation. As a threat to validity in our paper, we had as a threat the construction validity when deciding which studies should be included in the review. But this aspect has been attenuated since we executed a protocol. The SLR protocol was also interactively reviewed by 2 other researchers with practical experience in the research areas we're studying. Regarding external validity, the results of this review cannot be generalized because they are based on the specific set of keywords in the search source that were used for data collection and at a particular time interval, last 10 years. However, some strategies, such as the definition of a broader search string and the inclusion of non-exclusive search sources in the area of requirement elicitation, have been taken to obtain a greater number of possible primary works. Internal validity can be raised due to replications of similar works to mitigate this threat. Some measures were taken, as a SLR protocol was defined and strictly followed, and when necessary, two researchers was consulted until reach a consensus on the acceptance of identified studies. So, as a conclusion, we presented in this paper a systematic literature review (SLR) to identify in the literature the works that use creativity and empathy techniques in requirements elicitation. After applying the inclusion and exclusion criteria, we identified 58 primary studies to answer the research questions that were defined to conduct the SLR. Thus, we can conclude that in the literature there are several works that use creativity and empathy techniques in requirements elicitation. We also investigated whether there are works that use the techniques of empathy and creativity in private requirements elicitation. We have identified some works that use empathy in private requirements elicitation, although it is still in a very beginner way. We have not identified any work in the literature that use creativity techniques in private requirements elicitation. We found some techniques considered by the literature to be creative. This finding allows us to conclude that it's in an area of research that deserves the attention of researchers and needs to be explored by the software development community. As a future work, we intend to use creativity techniques to carry out privacy requirements elicitation in the development of a real software system. So if you have any questions or remarks, we can email us. Here we have the our emails. Okay, thank you a lot.